Domain Tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about articles. This is our discussion area. So basically the idea here is we pick out some articles based on either things that we think are important or things that you've asked us to take a look at. And there's an article just captured it perfect. We break it down, we go through that. What you're going to see in today's is we're definitely getting ready for some of those performance segments. And I'm really excited. We talked about some of our programming last week. We have started to book guests now for some of those audience-driven segments. So next week, you can tune in live Monday on the 14th. So it'll be episode 85. And we've got an expert in who built up a third-party risk management system from the ground up. And he's going to share what worked and what didn't work. Edna Conway is already scheduled to join us back. She's going to come in July. And we're going to talk about intellectual property and how to share ideas while protecting yourself and things to take a look at. And I got a few other people we're starting to schedule out. So it's exciting. And so you'll see some of these trends now will build into some of these features as we take a look at them. And, Paul, I want to pay you a compliment because, and I think people appreciate this, but I just want to state it again. I've really loved how you've grown and built from a podcast into a complete network. And I hope people realize that we're actually really selective with the partners that we work with. And so I'm actually enjoying listening to the partners when we start each of these segments. And, thinking about Domain Tools there, Tim Chen, CEO of Domain Tools, was on episode 83 last week. Great. And he shared a lot of really good insights, but then he also talked about some of the downsides of the GDPR. It's kind of like the blind spot. I got some great feedback off of that in the first 24 hours. So I hope you guys went and checked to see if Tim actually set up a GDPR page or not, and what you thought of it, and what did you act on it? Had you thought about that before, or where does that even fit in your busy schedule? So I just, Paul, you've done a great job at getting good partners that really fit and that benefit what we're trying to get done as an industry and as a community. And I'm excited to be part of it and to continue to be part of it. So thank you for putting that together.
It's a lot of fun.
All right. So we talked about Source Boston. The big announcement here is I've actually last week, right after the program, client wanted to know if I could come up this week and work with them Thursday, Friday in Boston. And I said, that sounds perfect. So I'm going to fly up Wednesday morning, and I'm going to go right to the show, and I'll catch up. So I'll be there. I'll get to see your talk live, and I'm going to have some copies of the Value Prop Scorecard. And you've got some questions as well. And you and I are going to sit down, and we're going to go talk to some people, and we're going to break it down and see what works and doesn't work and how it all comes together. So if you're going to be there, definitely look us up and try some of this out and let us know how it works and how to fix it. More for me, this is kind of like that plenary week, and I'm going to get those pieces done. And then I'm going to announce some of the details on what the beta program will look like between now and the end of the quarter to really start to use that. And then the whole Value Prop Scorecard, we'll release that for free over the summer as a total package for people. So,
and I'm really looking forward to having dinner with everyone, yourself included. We got to sit next to each other and catch up, break bread.
Because it's like we never talk. So.
Well, maybe not bread, but we'll eat together.
You guys can have all the bread you want. If it just stays off of my plate, we're good.
And wine, last time was ridiculous, the dinner. We're going to the same place again. I'm just excited about it because it was just awesome. It was a good networking event and a chance for us to catch up, which is...
and the snow is gone, right, Paul? It's safe for me to come back north.
The last time I think I was telling my family, I'm like, the last time I was in Boston, it was just, I remember Keith and I trying to walk from the hotel to the event, and there was just like snow everywhere, and our shoes it was awful. This is going to be, I think, 7 degrees and sunny, so...
All right. Well, that sounds perfect then. All right. So I love the title of this first one, The Work Required to Have an Opinion. This was on Farnham Street, Shane Parrish's stuff. He's just, I love all the work he's producing. In fact, he's got some articles and he's done some stuff around how to read books to get something out of it. And I'm going to pull from that some of the stuff Ryan Holiday's done, maybe reach out to each of them, see if they got some tips and strategies, and we'll roll that into our book club. I'm targeting as fast as possible, but realistically looking at all the mechanics of getting it ready for everybody. Probably Q2, we'll be able to launch that. So he's got this one called The Work Required to Have an Opinion. Here's a quote from it. It's a Charlie Munger quote. So if you tend to track this stuff, most people know who Warren Buffett is, billionaire, iconic investor. And I think it's fair to say his number two, if not, let's just say his partner in a lot of this is Charlie Munger. They both spend a lot of time looking at systems and looking at how we think and how we think about things. And I love this quote. If you can argue better than the smartest person who holds the opposite view, that is when you're entitled to hold a certain view. And so the point to it is, it's not, and I don't mean like you can't have an opinion on something and then the opinion changes, or you look at it, well, I don't like the way that looks on you. That's not the level we're talking about. We're looking at policy level decisions. We're looking at decisions that have an impact on something bigger and broader than you.
So we're not talking about just Facebook comments then, obviously.
I mean, yeah, well, and that's kind of the point, right? Like if you think about it, and part of what frustrates people is there are certain areas where you've done the work, you have the experience, you've thought about it, you know the pros, right, you know the cons, you've looked at it. Somebody comes along and goes, that stuff's all stupid, and anybody who likes that's obviously stupid, and you're like, that's not even, wait, what? No, it's not even close. And so what happens then is if you want to actually have an opinion on it, you've got to have a little bit of experience, you've got to understand it, you got to understand how it works in context. If you start looking at things like systems level thinking or going beyond it, I've always liked the idea. And in fact, I've tried to do this with my older children, is to say, if you have an opinion on something, I want you to argue against it with me. In fact, I started doing this when I realized how effective advertisements were. And they go, Dad, did you see this? This looks awesome. And I'd say, they're trying to sell you. Give me 3 reasons why I shouldn't buy it right now. And if you think about that, that's not easy for a child. But then I started trying it with adults. Also, not easy for adults. And that's the point to this, is it takes work. Like if you want to hold an opinion on something, you can parrot what other people have said. And if they've proven to you over time to be trustworthy, or it comports with your worldview, that's good. But that's what starts to happen. A lot of times, for you to truly hold an opinion, you've got to maybe sacrifice some of the things that you hold dearly to try to see things as they are. It's that disconnect, it's that dissonance to it. And I can tell you that this is a concept that's going to come up in some of the books that we will read as part of our book club, because the real key to a lot of this stuff, I mean, I've been taken of the last year or so with some of the Stoic philosophy. And in fact, we should bring our friend Jonathan Sander on, who is a philosopher, to talk about some of these different approaches. But the idea is, and I think it was Voltaire or somebody else that said, it's the mark of an educated person who can hold 2 opposing ideas at the same time and believe neither of them. And I like that. Like I like that level of discourse. But it really comes down to, then he brought this other part out, and we have seen this play itself out so many times. You'll see somebody who can do really well on a test, right? Book smart, but just street stupid. Can't change a flat tire, don't know how something works. So they can cite for you chapter and verse what the answer is. But when you say, cool, well, how does that work? They go, well, I don't know. And that's the point. If you can say, well, I know, if you understand how it works in context, if you understand how to take what you've learned and apply it, then you are more likely to have an opinion with more weight to it, because it's coming from experience and thoughtfulness, and you understand pros and cons and whatever other dimensions are there. And I think it's important. It doesn't mean you have to do that work for everything. The way I've been applying this, Paul, is there's a lot of things where I say I don't have an opinion on it. And it kind of surprises people, because we have to have an opinion. Well, I don't know enough about it to have an opinion. I can look at the merit of a particular argument or not. And as you'll see, as I start pulling through some more of these threads that we put together for today, sometimes it's okay simply to not have an opinion. There's only so much you can do. I think I mentioned before, but I maintain I'm on a news fast. In fact, I've largely checked out of Facebook. I still use Twitter. I still use LinkedIn. I don't really read the feeds of LinkedIn too much. We get the newspaper. I like doing the crossword puzzles, and I skim the headlines for the local stuff. And our children kind of like keeping what's up. But frankly, if you ask me like what happened over the weekend with politics, I don't know. But we have less shrubs on the front yard than we did before, and everybody's happy and it looks better. So like I'm finding that there's a lot of things that I don't need to have an opinion on. And so guess what? I don't. So I liked it. I thought that was an interesting element to it.
Well, and it can be, I think, scary, and certainly there's a certain level of FUD internally that you have when you have an opinion and you're bringing that in front of a person or group of people for the first time. And I think to overcome some of those fears, what I heard you saying that about this article and in general is that you kind of need to threat model your own opinion, maybe yourself, and maybe float that by some trusted individuals first and see what objections they come up with, which you're right, Michael, that very closely ties to some of the works that we talk about and some of the books that we cover. But and I also think it goes back to something that I learned very early on, certainly in a university setting, where new ideas were met with a lot of objections because, well, that's the way we've always done things, and the people working there 30 years, right? And so you'd have the meeting before you have the meeting. You'd put your opinions and thoughts and ideas in front of the individual members that were attending the meeting and see if you could get them on board. And at least you know where you stand when you get to the meeting and you're not dealing with all of it for the first time, and it gives you an opportunity to think about it. That story just reminded me of some of those tactics I've used in the past.
Yeah, well, and
not always successful either. It's not 100%, right?
Well, but what you're doing is you're doing the work. You're presenting your case, and you're listening to theirs. And what I've always found this means is that there is a certain flexibility to it. I mean, if we've watched enough politics, the idea is that once you form an opinion, you should never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, change it, or you'll be vilified and dragged through the mud over it. The reality is, as you learn more and you gain more context and you gain more experience, you very well may see something differently. Now, there's a big difference between changing your opinion and pandering. Pandering is never going to be popular. It works, but it's not popular. So it's exactly what you were talking about, and learning how to do stuff better, and I really like it. I put this one up about email. I know that, what is it you said this year? You want everything to be only email all the time because you can't get enough.
Yes,
you love it so much.
emails.
Something like that? Is that how you said it?
Email.
Well, so here's the interesting thing, and I really enjoy some of the stories that come out of the Harvard Business Review. So this one was talking about the fact that they did a study, and the average person spends 4.1 hours a day just handling work-related email. 4.1, more than half of your day, just wasting it away on email. And that a lot of people are stressed out over the messages. They're stressed out over the number of unanswered messages. They feel that they got to touch everything that comes in. And so we kind of have this weird love-hate relationship with email and all the different directions it goes and whatnot. And so this is another person who kind of stopped and said, wait, hold on. Let me take a look at it, right? As you and I are want to say, what problem are we trying to solve? And by the way, are you going to get rid of email? Good luck. I mean, maybe one day, but not right now. No, there's still a lot of value in email when it's done right. So she breaks down all the stuff that she did in terms of it, but she pointed out a couple things. Every time you say yes to something, it creates more work for you. So it was a short email, it was 5 lines, and you said, okay, sounds good. How much more work did you just get out of that? And do we pay attention to it? Because it happens so incrementally. And she broke down like the number of requests that were on average per day. And I think she said it was like an average of 10 requests for her per day. So if you're just looking at those as individual requests, it's fairly easy to say yes, but at least more work. But then she said, but when you look at that, you realize that that's 50 requests a week. That's 200 requests a month. You can't possibly humanly say yes to all of them and execute. It gets a lot easier to say no, because then you can say, I can't. Like, I'm so freaking overwhelmed. And it's going to come down to something we talk about with the value prop and the value prop scorecard, and that you and I talk about a lot here. Do you know what your focus is, and do you know where your priorities are? If so, keep your focus and hit your priorities. Say no to the rest. And if not, then you need to figure out what you need to be focusing on and where your priorities are. I got to tell you, Paul, I have spent the last year and a half unsubscribing from stuff I didn't need to. And then I followed, I don't remember if it's a Getting Things Done or somebody else's. I feel like it was co-opted off of that. But like, I have a couple email folders. One for like, this is something that needs action. It's called Today, but it's really like in the next day or two. I have one for something I need to work on this week. Sometimes let it go to next week. And then I kind of have like a beyond. And that's it. And if it comes in, I touch it once. The only thing I think I'm going to add to it, I don't know if we did it as an article discussion or it's just something I read, but their advice was don't open email until 11 o'clock in the morning. And I said they tried it for a week, and it was really hard the first 2 or 3 days. And by like the 5th day, they were like, wow, I got so much more done in my day. But then same thing, started tracking. Did I miss any urgent emails in that 1 week period? Nope. Did anything bad happen because I didn't get back to anybody fast enough? Also, nope. And it was kind of like, oh, I like that plan. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
But
I like that too, because a lot of times I think we're just conditioned to, you get to work, you check your email, right? That's kind of like the first thing that
Paul,
you do.
you get out of bed, you grab your cell
Right?
phone before you even get out of bed, and you're checking your email.
I like that approach because I think it can make you scattered, right? It can make you think about, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to answer this person, and then when you do another work, it's like in the back of your head, like, oh, I got to answer that. If you just don't look at it till 11, that lets you focus on work. And I don't know about you, Michael, and I don't know about our listeners, but I'm the type of person I'm most productive, I feel, right up until that 11 o'clock in the morning thing, right? I'm most productive in the morning. And why waste that productivity on something like email is my philosophy now.
No, Paul, but I think that's exactly the right philosophy. I mean, the reality is if we can start channeling stuff the right way and understand where our focus on our priorities are, we can execute on that. And if that requires email to get people involved, great, that's fine. And P.S., someone can look for that update after noon. No, I'm the same way. I think, what I've done relative to this as well, and we're going to get to the discussion here on productivity in a second, but I'll lead out with this. Mondays are production days now. And I had a couple mistakes in the last couple of weeks where I've scheduled calls on my production days, and I got smart. And you know what I schedule now for my production days? Nothing. Monday is the show. Now, I'm actually trying to get ahead on show prep by 2 or 3 weeks so that our whole production team has got time to prepare. Our guests feel prepared. You and I feel prepared. And the whole quality goes up. But that also includes any writing that needs to get done, any of the webinar stuff that we're working on. I just try to handle all that on Monday. And what I'm finding is I stay in one groove. Now, I need to get better about when I engage with email, but wow, what a difference. And I'll tell you what I did last week. Last week was what I called my chaos week. So I try to build in time every day for things to just not go right or for me to be a little tired and just deal with it, right? Fridays for me then are my catch-up day, my chaos day. So the idea on the Friday is whatever I thought would get done Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that didn't, hopefully I can get it done Friday. I finish the week strong, and then I can start again the next week. Well, last week I did a chaos week. I took as few calls as possible and just tried to catch up on all these things that had started, didn't get finished. And Paul, I got a lot of them finished. By Friday afternoon, I was feeling really good, had a great weekend. And now I've started this week. I don't feel that nagging of like, oh, I got all these things hanging over me. I got one thing I got to focus on this week. Value prop scorecard, getting to Boston on Wednesday, and then 2 great days with a client back home. That's it. That makes me feel so much better as we're trying to do that. So, in fact, let's skip around. So Sam Altman, and I don't follow the blog much, but I might start it, did a whole article on productivity, and it's worth reading. In fact, it's worth reading enough that I grabbed a copy of it and stuck it in a folder to say, go back and reread this. Anybody who takes the time to think about their process, to think about where their investment is, to measure their time and figure it out. In fact, that's the big thing I loved about this was at the bottom, he said it's shocking to him how many people don't know the value of their time. Paul, you and I have been talking about this for years. And when I go and I work with people on value, I give them, in fact, let's give people a little gift. You want to basically understand the value of your time. Take your salary, your current salary, lop the last 3 zeros off it, divide by 2. So, for example, if you earn $100,000 a year, and I'm not worried about take-home net, gross, whatever, just $100,000 a year. Call it your gross number, right? Your salary, $100,000 a year. Take off the last 3 zeros, you get to 100, divide by 2, it's 50. It means your time is worth roughly $50 an hour. I always like to point out, it doesn't mean you're worth $50 an hour. It doesn't diminish you. It just means now your time is worth that. So if you want to tell me that you can save $20 by doing this thing yourself, but it's going to take you 5 hours, that costs you $250 to save 20. That doesn't strike me as a good deal. But as you and I have talked about, this doesn't apply. Like, so for example, I was doing yard work this weekend, teaching my son how to use a mattox and an axe and getting my hands in the dirt and feeling good and moving my body. Was that the best choice for, what my time is worth? No, not purely. Was it satisfying? Absolutely. I mean, swinging an axe and stuff. If you haven't done it, let me recommend it.
It's wonderful.
But it was good family time. It was time digging the dirt. It was improving the quality of things. It was using our hands. It was teaching our kids how to do stuff. Entirely worth it. And so if you're the person who mowing the lawn is your moment of zen, then that's great. Don't worry about it. And painting is your thing. Then paint away. You and I both do a lot of projects that are fun, and we're getting our kids involved. That's great.
And let's face it, a lot of it too is to prevent your wife from swinging an axe at you, which is sometimes could be a likely outcome, depending on. Yes.
Yeah, she's pretty handy with it, so I do need to be careful. So the idea is you need to know the value of your time so you can invest it properly. Now, the other thing that Sam talked about in this article that I liked a lot, and we are very much going to put into one of those segments that we do, a lot of people mistake motion for action. So they say, well, look, it's running on ice. Look at me. Look at how busy I am. No, you're busy. You're not productive. And you need to be moving forward in a direction. You need to make progress, not just motion. And a lot of people get that confused. So Sam schedules time to think every day, right? We call this the deep work. We did an article recently on makers versus managers. And I've been reading a lot lately about routines. And it's fascinating because I've always felt, and I don't know how you do it, Paul, but I've always felt like, no, I mean, I'm good. Like I can make it work. And as I'm getting older, I'm like, I really need a routine. Like not quite at the sit on my lawn with the hose spraying people because I don't like the way that they looked at me. Although I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. But it's much more of like, as you just said, there's a time when I'm creative and I can execute better. Okay, am I matching the right task to that? Did I give myself time to think about something more deeply? I think there's a trap. I think you can give yourself too much time. But I kind of like this. And then he talks about prioritizing his work in a way that generates momentum. So the things that are important, get a task done, you feel good, get the next one done. You feel good, get the next one. And that's exactly the way last week worked for me. I just kept knocking down tasks. And every time I got another one done, I got a little bump and I'm like, let's get the next one done. And I really like that worked. Last piece here, because this is a lot of the themes we've been talking about. I think Sam did a great job of really distilling it down. Get ruthless about saying no and do your non-critical tasks as quickly as possible. And I added, without creating more work for yourself. So if it's a task that can be done quickly, but it's not critical, it's not core to whatever it is you're trying to get accomplished, but it needs your attention. Give it the smallest amount of attention you can give it to get it done properly, then move on to the next thing. Like don't dwell on it, don't worry about it, just knock it out, move on. I think that's a good lesson for a lot of us in security. And some of you have heard me say this before. This is why a lot of security things don't get funded, or they get funded as many as possible. They don't understand it. It doesn't feel like a critical task. It feels like a non-critical task. And the executive wing looks at it and says, this is a non-critical task. I'm going to give you the smallest amount of budget possible, and please just get this out of the way. If that happens, you've got two options. Option one, agree and get it out of the way as quickly as possible and let people focus on everything else. You're actually doing really well if you do that. Or take time to figure out why it's not a non-critical task and help people understand where it fits in the priorities and how that works with everything else. But I'm starting to see a lot of people now, and think about it. We just had a great conversation with Liz, and she said, look, I'm here to say yes. I don't want to be the person saying no. I've been working with a lot of great security teams lately that have said, Michael, we don't want to be the team of no. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That doesn't mean you have to be the bobblehead saying yes to everything. There's a balance point in it, and there's no harm in asking somebody what they're trying to get done, the problem they're trying to solve, helping them get excited about it, see the different pathways. That doesn't necessarily mean you're the one who needs to do it, or that it even fits into the overall priority scheme for you. And that's where we have a lot of opportunities when we take a look at it. So any tips from you on productivity, things that are working well for you, or things that you can echo or even challenge from Sam?
Short of cloning myself, no. I know it's very cliche, but
it's okay. I've thought about that, and then I thought I don't think I'd want another me. So I'm
going back to
good.
our wives. Not sure they want another of us either.
I've asked. I can tell you the answer on that is a definite no. All right, so I like this one. I've been thinking a lot about decisions and decision making. This is Terry Starbucker, a great leadership guy. Did a thing on how great leaders simplify decision making, and it comes down to what we call a bias for action. What's crazy is, and I quoted it because that's the way it was written there. I actually have in one of my Straight Talk courses, it's building your bias for action, because it's the exact same kind of conversation. So what do you need to have a bias for action? You got to get the right information at the right time, right? Okay. You've got to surround yourself with people that you trust to break it down. He gives this great example about being able to do $1 billion deal. Guy decides on the number to throw out on the table in 20 minutes or less. A lot of people look at that and go, what, are you crazy? No, he had a great team, broke down to the real core issue in 1 page or less, could look at it and go, oh, that's the potential. I see the multiple. Great. I'll give you this, $1 billion number. Mm-hmm. Tell me what makes sense on it. So you got to have the right people. And then you got to get over the fear of failure, which I think is tough for us in security. Paul, you and I have interviewed a lot of people that talk about how in security, failure once could be terminal, or at least feels terminal. I've shared before, that was my very first day on the job. I was on a technical team, wasn't yet doing security, and I was told, well, welcome, new guy. When you screw up, the world's going to come, sit on your shoulders and destroy you. And if you do a good job, no one's going to notice it. But here's my advice: don't screw up. That's how a lot of us do. So you got to get over that. You got to be willing and able to make mistakes and gather the right information and act on it. And then with your structure, just keep it simple. We see so much complexity, and it doesn't have to be. You can. There's a guy named Alan Weiss. Love his stuff, and he actually wrote this morning like there's like maybe 10 or 12 issues in the world that impact like every single team. Stop trying to tell me that you're different and this is different, and I've got to understand the rotation of Mars relative to Venus to figure out. It's like, dude, it's just one of these 5 things, right? Okay, let's get to it. And that's how you can get stuff done and be better with it. So I kind of dug that as well. Last piece here, I'm kind of curious your take on this. How to cure a bad case of metric fixation. This actually looks like a book I want to go read. They used the quote. I felt like it was an Einstein quote, but then again, on the internet, everything's attributed to Einstein or Abe Lincoln. But the quote is, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. I've spent a lot of time in my career looking at measurements, and that's why I don't use metrics very often. I talk about measurements. And what we're starting to find is we're getting to this point where there's not a problem with measurement. There's not a problem with metrics. In fact, I find there's kind of 2 camps: the people not doing it at all, or the people obsessing over it. And they present this very elaborate. It's a dashboard. It's got all these widgets and all these updates and pivot tables and donut tables and everything else. But if I say, cool, so what do I do with this? Common answer? Well, I don't know. Well, what are you reporting on? Like, what are you reporting on, and is it helping you? And are you spending so much time gathering numbers and trying to pitch them that they're not actually helping you, and it's distracting you from the stuff that you want to be able to do? The point is, the guy broke it down to this: we're focusing on the wrong things, we're trying to oversimplify, and we're stripping the context and the meaning away. It resonated with me, so of course I selected, threw it in, and he's got a book on this that's in the link that I want to go check out now. It seems kind of interesting.
I think the opposite thing happens to me is that I see processes being implemented that are either impossible or really difficult to measure. And typically that's fair. When someone goes like all analog, or as we talked about, they're doing things in email or in spreadsheets, and those are just very difficult to measure. And we want to measure for a lot of reasons, right? In our processes, we want to measure to evaluate employees. We want to measure the effectiveness of a process. That can be really difficult to do if it's up on a whiteboard or an index card. And I'm not discouraging those things. Those things are important. But when that becomes part of a process that you have to then go measure, that can be detrimental, because I want to know how effective that process is. And if it's note cards, that's a difficult or very manually intensive way of actually measuring it. Now, certainly I'm a fan of let's do it in the whiteboard index card manner, get the process down, then look at something that we can implement. And one of the requirements is always, okay, when we implement this, how do we measure it, right? Coming back to some of Michael Straight Talk stuff, right? How do we measure that? And not just how, but like what do we want to measure? And not just that, what actions do we want to take based on those measurements? I actually think with Dan from Straight Talk, that's really the fundamental goal of some of the projects we're doing with Dan from Straight Talk is figuring out what to measure, how to measure it, and then, okay, how does that impact our decisions, right?
Yeah, and I like what you just laid out there. Start with something, figure it out, keep it simple, flow, learn from it, move on. So I think that's the right way to do it. And it's, and that's why it's, by the way, that's why it's question number 4 in the Straight Talk process. Because if you can't tell me the problem you're trying to solve, the value you expect to get, and the impact it's going to have, then you have no real shot at knowing what to measure. Mm-hmm. And there's more. We could do a whole segment on measurement at some point if people are interested in it. But with that, let's take a short break, which is a good chance to go to Facebook.com. I might be there less, but you can be there more. Facebook.com/securityweekly, and you can stay informed of live broadcasts. We've got surveys coming up. We've got opportunities to engage, places we're going to be. There's so much stuff there, and it will keep you excited, and it'll make us feel good. And when we come back, how did Carbon Black do in their IPO? Well, we're going to tell you.